Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the SoDA Series Live. I am Tom Beck, Executive Director of SoDA. We're thrilled to have you with us today. Every month, the SoDA Series Live brings you conversations with design leaders from around the world, and we dig into trends, professional development, teams, and what it takes to build a successful design practice in this day and age. We're grateful to our partners at Adobe for collaborating with the SoDA community on these sessions. And with that, I'd like to introduce Talon Wadsworth. Talon is a principal designer at Adobe, MC extraordinaire, and he helps us lead and run these sessions each month. So how are you, Talon?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tom? Always great to be
Um,
with you.
yeah, thanks for being with us here today. We're looking forward to this discussion. I'd also like to introduce our guest for today. Mirek Nisenbaum is a partner and head of the digital practice at Base Design. Base is a globally distributed collective of design studios working with some incredible brands, particularly in the cultural space, although they work in other areas. And Mirek and the team at Base have been members in the SoDA community for the past few years. Been an amazing addition to the group. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Mirek. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone.
For those of you, if this is your first time joining, I'll be dropping off the video in just a minute, but we'll be interacting in LinkedIn in the comments section. So if you do have questions or comments along the way, please raise them there, and we will get the questions surfaced to Talon and Mirek. Also, just say hello and let us know where you're calling in from or dialing in from. We'd love to see the global distribution of people on these sessions. I think we've been up to 30 countries in one session in the past, and that's just awesome to see. So thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate it. And Talon and Mirek, over to you. Have a great conversation today.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Mirek, it's great to be speaking with you after a couple stops and starts due to some unforeseen circumstances last month, but I'm so glad to be speaking with you this morning.
Thank you, Talon, and thank you for having me in these conversations. It's certainly sort of followed who has been speaking before me and listened to it, and it's a great company to be in.
It's such a pleasure. Again, like this is probably why I've been here at Adobe for so long, is that not only do I get to make creative tools, but get to immerse myself and speak with leaders out there, practitioners in the industry. So really, this is just a pleasure for me. So thank you. Well, great. Well, I always like to start with kind of giving you the opportunity to sort of talk about your creative journey and kind of how you kind of came to be here, at Base Design, doing the work that you're doing. Again, we have a lot of people, I think, tuning in who are, just starting out their careers, or, as Tom mentioned, right, like, hopefully, like, this is we're giving some signposts to some people as they're navigating, kind of their own journeys. So please tell us a little bit about, just kind of take us back. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got your start, and kind of, how you've come to lead digital design at Base Design.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that maybe my journey, I hope my journey is not going to have to be repeated by anyone anymore, because it's been a while. But there are some interesting moments in it that I think affect very much where I landed. So I come from Eastern Europe, from Belarus, and I actually started with a fine arts education. I was some years ago. I was learning to paint, and then I moved, and art history, and maybe art history was the more important piece. And then I moved to United States, and as a sort of an immigrant who could barely speak any English, I needed to figure out ways to make money, and art history wasn't going to really help me there. So I went to a small design school, and because I could draw, because I had my whole Eastern European education, I could really draw. And in that small design school, they had a computer lab with a tiny little, I don't know if you remember them, the tiny little Macintoshes. And that's how I got into it. I was just mesmerized. I had no experience with any computers before then, and then this thing showed up, and I dove in. And back in those days, if you knew how to turn it on and how to put the floppy disk in, you just sort of like, that was the beginning of the career. You were very much on demand. Like literally, there were ads in newspapers. Like, if you know how to turn on a Macintosh, you got a job. Yeah, and then I had my own little studio, and then we were doing lots of sort of motion animation, because that became my passion, and that is what I still think. Kind of with all of the good and bad, I think the good thing about the internet and the technology is that democratizes access to creative tools. And back then, for me, that was Flash. And so we kind of like, I dove head deep into that, started my own company. And then we all know what happened to Flash. And we went into web development. And that's how I came to join Base. Sort of was coincidental. We didn't seek each other, but once we've met, we felt there was an amazing possibility for collaboration. And we started to simply work on the same projects. And then we've realized that there's a great opportunity for both myself and Base to unite. And slowly I became a lead of the digital practice. So I don't think of myself as a lead of design practice. I feel also digital is a more comprehensive practice, because without making, you don't really design. Without designing, you don't really make. So in my mind, it's a more comprehensive set of tools and skills and knowledge that I lead. So I don't call myself a designer. And
I mean, I think that's a really understated sort of approach, I think, to creativity, sort of the understanding of the technology and the mediums, and then sort of, your practice, in terms of leading the digital studio there, is to really apply, the learnings, of the medium, and really making best use out of it, for your clients, or for the project.
Yes. And
yeah,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and that does seem like there's a through line there, going back to Flash, and I love sort of the touch point of Flash. I think a lot of designers in the digital space got their start with Flash because it gave you access to communicate via the medium of the web, in ways that were, again, the web was very rudimentary in its capabilities that it supported, and then Flash really accelerated the creativity in those digital spaces. And it was one of those big sort of markers of there was the web before Flash, and then there's the web after Flash.
Yeah, it was for sure, like, in my mind, that was at that point it felt like a giant moment. Oh my god. Now, given what's happening with AI, we can say that was a small moment. This is the giant moment, but the nature of the moment is the same. In my mind, it's access. It gives you access to expression, to think, to making, that you never thought was possible. And like at your fingertips. Without really that much friction. And that was to me, that was back then. So I wish I was 20 again, but
well, I still think there's probably the energy and the curiosity that probably drives your practice now, and the way that you lead the team. And there is this, as you were sort of speaking, we're thinking about these kind of like signifier moments, these sort of like evolutionary moments in design and sort of visual communication. I was thinking also of kind of Adobe's role in the early days of digital design, right? And someone like David Carson, really looking, we've lowered the barrier to entry for communicating, in these spaces. The use of typography, right? The sort of what was now capable with digital design tools that moved the visual language for those mediums forward, right? And I think you're right. That we're sort of in we're in one of those evolutionary moments yet again in terms of visual communication.
Right, and accessibility to typography is kind of like that's what gave birth to Macintosh to begin with.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah, you're right. That's why, and why I love working in the tooling space, and especially at this time, it's very exciting. You know, kind of moving on maybe a little bit here, talk about kind of your practice as the digital lead at Base Design and sort of dig in just a little bit more in terms of like what how you define that team and the role that team plays kind of within the larger studio.
Yeah. So Base is an interesting place. It's quite unique. We're let's say we're creative studio with heavy emphasis on brand. So I'll like to look at it from a little bit of a meta space. We are storytellers, myth makers, and you can see the negativity in that. But we, of course, being inside space, think of that as a positive. Because we think we are able to, as a company, as a team, to sort of help people and organizations identify who they are, and then give them the systems to communicate that outward and inward, but mostly outward. And digital, in that sense, is an incredibly powerful and important tool. And so the way I see the team is, first of all, we are not producing digital product. We are not producing websites. We are not making digital expression even. What we're doing is we're creating experiences, no matter the surface, experiences that are allowing us, or on behalf of the clients or clients themselves, to tell these stories. And when it works as a magic. That's why I talk about authenticity and stories so much. And that, in my mind, is the role of the team. And everybody on the team has to have that sort of a passion and understanding that ultimately what we're delivering is ability for people and organizations to tell these stories. So we're kind of like giving them frameworks, sometimes more expressive, sometimes less expressive, sometimes crazy, sometimes by the rules. That is irrelevant because that belongs to who you are, right? The format is not so relevant. What is relevant is always about the storytelling. It is always about giving them the tools to express themselves, to affect the perception, to change the narratives or create new narratives. And we hope we're doing it for the good people that deserve our skills and talent.
With great power comes great responsibility, right? Like as a designer probably once said. Yeah, no, you're right. I think when brand is done well, there is a magic to it because it feels invisible. It feels intuitive. And there is, I think there's something here I want to expose, which is, the sort of in your practice, sort of like understanding, the mediums, understanding the capabilities of the mediums, can help you to take advantage, of those spaces, so that the brand feels like a natural expression, within those digital environments.
Absolutely. That's why it's so exciting to be alive and working today, as well as scary. I don't want to sort of negate the scary part. That's something we all wake up as normal humans every morning, but yet exciting for sure, because like, again, the capabilities, the ways we can do, and the speed, and the sort of this kind of like constant avalanche of interesting stuff that's coming at you is amazing. And what you can deliver to the people and the organizations that hopefully are good and are aligned with us is quite stunning.
Yeah. To sort of set the stage, maybe before we dive into the sort of AI part of the landscape we're working in, kind of set the stage for us, like talk about some of the things that that you really tried to kind of bring to bear with your client work, like in the digital spaces, and just maybe give us like an example of something that like really excited you in terms of like where you felt like your team was able to, sort of express brand in these digital spaces in a way that really pushed the conversation forward around what brand could be. So maybe you can, something that was sort of something that was in the last few years that you said this was something that we really took advantage of the technology of these digital experiences to express brand in these new ways.
Many. There are many, but there is one that is sort of near and dear to my heart because we are continuously working with them, and it's such an amazing organization. That's a Studio Museum. Studio Museum in Harlem. Why? If you go to that website right now, what we were able to deliver is so organic and natural to them. And what I really, really love is that website is now, say, let's call it a year or a year and a half old.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it is better now than it was on the day we launched. That for us is an indicator that we have made something really strong, meaning that the client is able to take what the system that we have delivered to them, and through that evolve themselves, and through that system continuously to communicate to people. And it's not like crazy expressive website, because at the end it's a museum, right? So there's certain content, certain table stakes that need to be delivered, right? There's a collection, but at the same time, they have a unique point of view on how to show the collection. They have a unique point of view on who they are. And it's both in the content, of course, but also the way we essentially pitch that content to the audience. For example, we have several unique experiences there that are, for example, we have an open studio. Many museums have open studios. We decided to do an open studio online. And once you have that, and you let the artists express themselves on the museum website, you look at it and like, oh, why doesn't anyone else do it? And you think, but how does it relate to brand? In fact, it's because of who they are. It is because of the brand that they are. It is because of the people that they are that run this organization.
Yeah.
That fits to them, and that becomes suddenly one of the defining features of the organization, and that's what they are communicating online. And if you've never even been to the museum, you suddenly understand that they have this intimate relationship with the artists, that they don't simply create gallery space to expose, they are actually facilitating the art making.
That's so fascinating, I think, in the ways in which you've enabled the Studio Museum in Harlem to continue to evolve and express themselves kind of through those kind of digital frameworks that you're creating. But that seems like there's a big skill gap in terms of the application of the framework. And so how did you work with them to kind of enable them to take advantage of the framework of the digital expression of the brand? What were some of the things that you and the team kind of did to sort of in that handoff or in that enablement of that team?
So the best relationship with the client is when there is no handoff. When we feel about the way I feel that it really clicked when we stopped speaking about the project as our relationship with the client, and instead we all fully embrace, and it becomes us. We can't claim that we're part of the museum, but the project we're making together is actually like as deep in us as it is in them. And so there is actually no handoff. It's fully collaborative. The team at the studio, it's not a large museum. Studio Museum in Harlem is not the Met. And so the team there is very compact. And yet we have worked with them to give them the tools to think of what do they need, how they would manage it. So now you're talking like practicalities and logistics. But when we work with clients to create like content strategies, we always think, what will they actually be able to sustain? How will they do it? Sometimes we advise, well, you should hire and beef up the team. Sometimes that's not possible. Then what can the existing team do? Or how can we repurpose some other way, some other content streams that you already have? And it's always a give and take. It's very, very collaborative. That's when it works. It kind of if there is a handoff moment, there is going to be a friction.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes you have to do that too. That's
yeah.
It's just
I
not as easy.
I appreciate you going into that a little bit, because I think that's exactly what I wanted to sort of highlight for our audience, is that a successful handoff where or not the handoff, but the successful collaboration, we'll say, leads to a great result, right, when it comes to the ongoing expression and evolution of a brand in these spaces.
1,000%.
And right.
1,000%.
And you're right. You're right in pointing out, right, there's, when that handoff happens, like that's where it breaks down. When there is this kind of like sort of.
I would even overemphasize that. I would say it's never it's never about us. It is always about the client.
Yeah.
Because we can only do what we can do if we have the right partner across the table. We 100%. Can never do it without them. Like never, ever, ever. It's not a self-expression work. We work for them.
Yeah. I mean, talk about you're probably not every client maybe is open to that, but talk about how you kind of set the stage for building that trust or building out that collaboration with clients. Are there some clients that you choose to not work with because it doesn't really afford you, again, the opportunity to be successful in that way?
Yes.
Again, like how do you find and set up those relationships for that successful result with clients?
Well, so there is a self-selecting mechanics that's happening in the marketplace. We have a reputation. We've not done this for 1 year, so certain type of clients will not even come to us.
Yeah.
And when we feel the relationship is off, we don't go for it. Mm-hmm. And when sometimes the relationship is not as smooth as we wish. But I think what helps us is a fundamental belief that no matter how, say, off at the first glance the client may feel, fundamentally there is something special about them. There is about them as humans, about them as organization, about them as a business. And it is our job to unearth it for them. It is our job to bring it up. It is our job to give them the tools to communicate that. And when that something special is bad, then hopefully we haven't gotten into that project. We've had 1 or 2 clients that we wound up firing. That happens too. And sometimes clients fire, but that's rare. Mostly it is a self-selection process, and then a little bit of like sort of editorial push on our side. Why are we taking this project? And when we analyze whether we should take the project or not, one of the fundamental questions is not like one of the first questions. It's not really even about budget, but about, do we have the people? Do we have the creative opportunity to work there? Mm-hmm. They may have the ambition, but they may not have the right people there.
Yeah, and creating that kind of environment for for the client to have something successful that they feel good about, but also have your team feel good about the work that they're doing and successful with the outcomes and the collaboration with the client.
Yep.
I mean, there's one other thing you kind of mentioned, when we were sort of teeing up our conversation today, which is sort of maintaining kind of authenticity. And I think there's some things here in which that we've been describing is sort of like help your team kind of maintain kind of that authenticity or that kind of integrity, when it comes to, setting up a successful collaboration with clients. So talk about how you kind of balance that. There's the clients coming to you for a service, but they're the things that your team is trying to do or maintain or to express as well. And so how do you ensure, again, that that you maintain the authenticity when it comes to the approach, the design, or the output, of the studio?
Actually, that's pretty common sense because we don't work for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we do not have a point of view until we dig into their challenges, their problems, their essence. So we have quite a deep immersion process always. We sort of stand by it that we always have a joke that at base we always question the brief. When we get a brief, we re-examine the brief. Is this really the brief? And so that digging deep and that trying to understand their business, trying to truly understand their problem, like to make it ours.
Yeah.
From museum to what I think is another very successful project, Murray's Cheese, for example. So it's extremes. It's not like Tom said, we mostly work in culture. Indeed, we love to work in culture, but we also work in e-commerce. We also work in retail. We work in many, many places. The approach never changes. We go true deep into what are the needs, what is the challenge, what is the fundamental challenge that we're trying to solve. And sometimes it's a single idea, sometimes it gets complex, but nevertheless, we always try to focus it and then sort of output what will be the system that will allow them to communicate that idea or set of ideas. When we speak about authenticity, I think when we go through that process, when we make their problem almost our own, it is inevitable that the output has to feel authentic.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, we say we're storytellers, and that's what we do for a living. On the other hand, those stories need to feel real to the people who tell them, right? Which, of course, our self-selecting client process helps us to do. Like I have to thank our reputation in the marketplace that we don't have to create fake stories.
That resonates a lot with me. I think that the approach in terms of you needing to find a way in to to identify with the client and their problem space, to have some empathy with that, but then be able to bring your expertise to bear, just to to look at the problem and actually even offer up that value to the client to say, hey, like this is the brief, but here's from our perspective as expert in the application and the sort of creation and application of brand, reflecting that brief back in some way with that added layer of expertise, right? And you're sort of offering up this added value when you can sort of find your way in and reflect back the brief in a way that moves their story forward.
And our breadth of expertise actually helps us to do that. The fact that we don't focus on a single vertical or single industry or single space actually truly helps us. Because when we work for a cheese retailer, we think culture. When we work for culture, we think retail. And that the multitude of these experiences helps us to focus on the right things and bring to the table kind of unexpected what ifs. And then kind of, especially when we examine, especially when we ideate, we can go quite broadly.
Yeah. And those unexpected moments that you come to are some of the most exciting. I remember that back from my sort of studio practice days, when we had the trust of the client and they, trusted in our expertise and the enthusiasm and empathy we're bringing to the table. Sometimes we could go take them on very unexpected journeys. And those were always the most exciting projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that, like, when you have enough trust from the client, and when you're tasked with their business to sell cheese online, let's be very pragmatic, and you tell them, actually, the focus of this project will be on engagement and not on conversion rate. That takes a lot of guts on the client side to trust you, to go with that, and then to trust you to deliver against that, and then the success is phenomenal. But it's I'm sure several people were waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, what did we just get ourselves into?
What are we doing? Well, this is a slight kind of, again, I'm sort of just following your lead here, but it also brings to mind that digital is a space that has data attached to those outcomes, right?
Yes.
So how do you again, you were saying, like, on the cheese project, the yes, we want to sell cheese online, but we're going to focus on this metric over this other expected metric. So talk about how maybe the measurable outcomes impact the work that you do or the decisions that you make on the various projects.
Yes, now you're touching the digital side of my brain. Because first we have to provide them a hypothesis. We never will
Mhm.
say, actually, you shouldn't be selling cheese online. We have a feeling you should be moving into this space and having a blog about how cheese is made. No,
Mhm.
we have a hypothesis to say you should not be focusing on conversion, because the conversion is not a leading indicator. The leading indicator is something else. So what is it? Well, let's look at your audiences. Let's look at the brand affinity. Let's look at how they're searching. So now we're digging into the data. What are they searching online for? Let's actually organize a survey to see how much they know about you versus the competition. So we bring in truly multiple sources of data. We build the case that says, and so our hypothesis will be, if we bring in these people that right now do not shop for you, for example, as was the case with Murray's, your business will explode. Because right now they don't come for you because the people who come for you already know you as Murray's.
Mhm.
And you're safe with them. They're an amazing group of people, but they're a limited group of people because of geography. You're going essentially global or countrywide. Let's bring people who do not shop you, who do not know you. How do we do that? Okay, now we have to have a different pitch, a different point of view. We have to tell them we're experts. We have to bring accessibility to the cheese because we sell funky cheeses. But how do we that can break a relationship because they buy something by accident and they'll never buy because they thought it was rotten when in fact that was supposed to be the cheese. So how do we create that relationship that physically exists? How do we bring that online? All of those questions are brought together with the data. The hypothesis is built, and that's how you sort of then you prove your case. And you have to be a little bit nervous. I strongly believe that if you are absolutely confident, like 100%, 1,000% confident in the outcome, if you yourself are not nervous about it, then maybe you are not ambitious enough.
Mhm.
So you have to have that. But
Yeah.
to the client, hopefully no clients are listening, you have to come as if you are 1,000% confident, because that's sort of the that's how it works. But if in fact if you have zero doubts, then maybe your ambition is too simple. Maybe you're just going for something that you already have seen others have done. And for us, we try to push. That's how we see our purpose. That's how we understand why clients push us, because we deliver something others don't. Actually, very
Yeah.
early in our digital practice, we worked with Equinox, and a woman that was running a project for them. We've asked her, because we were just starting the digital piece of base, and at that point we needed to understand why would people give us the work. And we pitched against quite strong competition, fully digital, solid agencies, really, truly, and they gave the project to us. And I said, so why? And she said, oh, very simple. Because everybody else whom we spoke to, we were absolutely confident that they would deliver what we would ask them.
Mhm.
Cubase came with a point of view helping us to figure out what we actually need.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the difference.
Yeah. And it shows the impact, the approach that the team takes, the practice that you're instilling in them. It becomes, like you said, this sort of self-selecting
Yep.
thing where the clients who are coming to base design for what base design can do, right?
Yep.
And I mean, there's something in there, which is, it is, you said, kind of, scary or vulnerable to be kind of going against this trend of optimization in the digital space that has kind of been the trend, for the past 5, 6, 8 years, right? That,
Yes.
like, optimizing towards the most impactful, measurable result, right? So, how do you kind of maintain kind of that kind of confidence, maybe internally, in terms of the approach, again, when there are a lot of these pressures that say, like, hey, we need to optimize, the SEO, we need to optimize, everything, down to the last sort of pixel,
Yep.
right?
So first, being base helps, meaning having the ethos, believing that everybody is unique. That helps right there, because once you have that, and once you feel that this is what you're delivering to the clients, to the people for whom you work, optimization becomes secondary. I wouldn't say we like intentionally, when we work on e-commerce piece and our checkouts, I hope, are flawless.
Yeah.
But that is not the focus of our project, or never is the focus of our project. That to us is a table stakes. However, delivering anything emotional that goes on top of that, not on top of the checkout, but even there, little moments that can make it emotional, little delight moments, little surprises. So that's in the more optimized experiences. But outside of the where the optimization is truly needed, I feel like if we are to standardize our output, we're just essentially stop being who we are. We are somebody else, and there's like plenty of value in doing that work. I don't want to diminish that work. It's just not what people
The
come
work base. Yeah.
But I do feel that overall the world has become kind of more, I don't know how to put it, generic. And when I like lots of people find comfort in that. I find boredom in that. That's like maybe because of my background, because I was sort of educated to be an artist, and so maybe that's why I sort of like people say I feel so comfortable. This cafe looks like my cafe in Brooklyn, and when they're in Turkey, and I think like, why did I bother coming to Turkey for that cafe?
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely resonates with me, and I feel the same. I think there is in this era of optimization, like things have become pretty generic because people, I think, are always looking for the safe bet, right? The reproducible result, and so it does kind of take a little bit of bravery and courage, both on the creative's part, but also on the client's part, to go on that journey to move the conversation forward.
I'm going to be a little provocative. I'm going to say when people take that route, not always, but quite often, and I hope people don't curse in comments, maybe they're being a little bit lazy. Maybe it takes a little bit of extra work to think, what are the other KPIs that could be here? What are the other measurable things that could be here that will actually push us farther? Yes, there are budgets. Yes, there are limitations. Yes, but ultimately people come to us as designers, as builders, as creators for something that is unique. I fundamentally believe that. Yes, they come to others for something that is not unique and standard. Sure. But to us, they come for something that is unique. And so it is our job to, no matter the budget, no matter the limitations, to look for that and to guide the client in the right way to say, okay, if that's your budget, then maybe we have to let's not make a giant website. Let's make a tiny social presence, but make sure we actually communicate what we need to communicate rather than making something that's standard that essentially defeats the purpose.
Right. That's, I mean, again, the approach really resonates with me, and the practice I had kind of before I joined Adobe, and definitely something I'm trying to kind of within the Adobe continue to push in those ways. And so definitely resonates with me. Let's kind of move kind of to kind of where we're at now in terms of all of us wrestling with these new tools and these new capabilities, these new modes of communication. And can you share with us some of the work that you and the team are doing, both in your kind of investigation, but maybe even an ongoing client example you can share about how you're looking at these new tools, at these new spaces, and the things that are most interesting or exciting, to you?
So the space is AI.
AI, digital experiences, we'll say more broadly as well. But yes, the AI-ness of it all.
I am one of those. So there are two levels to look at AI, and I'm gonna first identify them and then say which level. One is to think about AI as a broad societal question.
Yeah.
And there I am, let's say, a pessimist. And let's leave it at that. Because we can have another long conversation.
We can go down that. Yeah, that could be a whole other podcast session. Yes.
And then let's talk about generative AI and what it's doing for our industry. And there I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
So notwithstanding the societal problems that we have outside of the industry, I think it's going to be painful. Still, I think the change is going to be so big. We've never experienced anything like that in this industry. And yet I'm an optimist because, as I sort of alluded to in the beginning, it opens up the world of what was not possible to the kids like myself, say 30 years ago.
Mhm.
And that to me is amazing. What the kids will do with that is the giant question. And I hope they do not go the lazy route. Again, now I'm going to like push on that word, because the lazy route will bring the homogenization for sure.
Yeah.
That's it's because it is like now accessible, so easy. I hope they push. I hope they find pleasure in actually finding unique. I hope they push the AI, because the tool is already so malleable. You can already achieve so much with it. It's insane. We're less than 3 years in. It's insanity. And what you guys are experimenting on Adobe side, and like all of the other things that are happening, it's mind-boggling. It is going to bring us new tools, new processes, new job descriptions, completely new ways of thinking, which I think for us as base, for me at least, sitting inside of base, is actually exciting, because I always feel about ourselves as generalists. And I think AI allows generalists to have more impact.
Yeah.
Because things that were not accessible to us are becoming accessible to us. What are we experimenting with?
Yeah. Anything you can share?
Some I cannot share. We had an amazingly interesting project that was done by our team in Belgium, where they created a campaign for an opera theater, La Monnaie, and it was in the early days of AI, meaning a whole year ago. They have fed short descriptions of opera to, I don't remember which tool they used, to generative AI, and asked for the image output. And the results were stunning. I mean, they were funny, they were surprising, they were curious, they were purely, because back in those days, remember, the AI was like, you would have like 6 eyes and the hand growing out of your head. But yet they were somehow still spiritually related to the subjects of those operas. And so they have created a tool. They have created an entire campaign that allowed the client to create posters within a given design framework, create posters using AI. And it was just a stunning, amazing campaign. And why did it work so magically, so well? Everything was based on the idea, because the theme of the campaign was faith. And what is the better way to tempt faith and see what faith produces than to give something to AI and see what happens? So it was a perfect match of the technology, the idea, and the output. So that's where it was like done for a client. Of course, we're experimenting. Of course, like on a base level, on a code level, that's everybody who is dealing with the code is already using AI as just a production tool. There is that. That's a foundational. And from what I know from our development team, essentially they're already saving 30% of the time. And that's, as I say, it's a start. So that means that their jobs will fundamentally change. Very soon they will become architects. They will stop thinking of themselves as coders. I'm thinking in 2 years from now, that's it. They just have to think of the architecture, and the machine will produce whatever they want. So people, and that's the same with designers. It's maybe going to take a little more. We should no longer think of ourselves as how to make. The question will always become what. It will never be like how. The making will be done. But right now it's I mean, as we all know, everybody has access to it. So people know how helpful or interesting it is in the ideation phase. That's where we are. That's where we do.
Yeah. And going back to faith, right there, there is faith that these new tools and technologies will open up new opportunities for visual communication within these mediums, right?
I think so. What the media will be, we don't know. I mean, it's fool's errand to try to predict 5 years from now.
I mean, there's still this. And I think you're talking about, so the redefinition, of the designer. In a way, or the creative, and there had been its own kind of optimization going on, where the scale, of the digital production problem was so large that it required almost like this specialization, right? And this
Yep.
sort of ramping up of these digital production specialists, right?
Right.
And as you're saying with coders, like the coders will be more playing more of the architect role, and where the best creatives were always kind of approaching the work in that way, right? Whether
Exactly.
it's sort of, not just the how, but the why, right? Really creating the framework around the why of the problem or the solution. And
Exactly.
then whatever tool that we needed to express those ideas, we were doing it intentionally with the why, sort of in mind. And so whatever that new tool or the next revolution in mediums, right,
No.
that the creatives are going to be wrestling with technology tooling in the expression, of the why for the client, for the creative individually.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, the creative job suddenly gains capital C, so to speak, because
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
becomes the essence of the job.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
longer moving things around on the screen. That'll be gone very soon,
Yeah. Yeah.
sooner than we all can think about it.
Possibly, yeah. I'm sure, indeed, I'm sure it will. But I wanted to sort of like bring it out here as we're kind of, coming in here to the last 10 minutes or so. Want to make sure everyone in the chat, if they have a question, please put it there in the chat, and Kendall from the SoDA team will feed that here into Mirek and I. I wanted to kind of, there's one term that I was really intrigued by that I think is something that you yourself kind of coined when sort of talking about sort of your practice in the digital space, which is the idea of digital magnetism. And I wonder if that's a way to kind of like, again, some unify, whether it's an e-commerce for a cheese site, or a cultural sort of expression of a for a museum, or fashion brand, or kind of what have you. What does digital magnetism mean to you, and how does it sort of apply to your practice in the digital space?
Yes, the way that term came out was me trying to explain to my colleagues what differentiates a good, what I would consider good, online experience from not a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept bringing in sort of these human qualities to it. I was
Mm-hmm.
anthropomorphizing it. It feels like it was like as if I was speaking about the human. And so I've tried to then simplify it, but maybe I don't know to what level I succeeded, to kind of give it a term. So I'm calling it digital magnetism, just like the way humans have the magnetism, or whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
they attract. There are certain qualities that they will always share. And one of the important ones we've mentioned already is authenticity. There is emotional, so the things that create emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about like, is it loud or is it quiet? Is it bold or is it soft? Is it cold or is it, no? It's about creating the emotional connection, creating the conversation, creating something that after after somebody had looked at that, after the people whom you were trying to talk to have been part of that conversation, something is actually left behind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a so to move away from the transactional nature of the web, which is where
Mm.
the whole optimization piece comes in,
Yeah.
to move more towards the emotional, more towards and again, maybe that's my sort of background and culture that speaks through me, but like I am seeking that emotional connection. I am seeking meaning that goes beyond the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that can come from the content, that can come from the expression, that can come from, or ideally from all of those things together. And when all of those things work in unison, and we
Yeah.
are the people who have orchestrated that, well, then I think we did our job, and I'm gonna call it digital magnetism. That's
I love that. I think it gets at the humanness of it all,
yeah,
right? And like I said, like I think that in this kind of, again, you mentioned that in this age of optimization, like there are a lot of people who are trying to convince us that it's not the culture that moves the story forward, that it's somehow the platform or the algorithm. And it's like, no. It's always been the culture. It will continue to be the culture, right?
And that's what's so interesting about, to sort of circle back to AI a little bit. To me, the question that it poses is this crazy giant question. So if simple decision making, if simple narrative can actually be done by machine, then what makes us human?
Yeah.
And there we go into like sort of the subjective experiences, right? Because that is ultimately what makes us human, what makes us alive, and us being organic machine and that being synthetic machine. And so these subjective experiences is what we're trying to provoke.
Yeah.
That's why we're seeking emotion. That is like ultimately what we're trying to reach. And so the companies and the people who are able to succeed doing that will be above the AI and will use AI as an amplification. And the others will simply use the AI for what it gives, which is like a good sort of solid output, and off they go. So there will be that kind of an avalanche of mediocrity. Yep, that will be there. That will be cool.
The slop has always been there in these sort of technological revolutions, right? And how do you create space to stand out, from the slop? And I think, I was reading something in the last few months about, the brands that are really driving connection and belonging, with their audience, against kind of breaking through. And I like how you were saying the AI tool becomes the amplifier, of the message rather than the vessel, for the message, right? Yeah, and we had a question from the chat, and I'm sorry that we didn't. If you're there in the chat, thank you for your question. I'm not sure you'll probably recognize it when I say it, but Mirek, the question from the chat, how do you think the structure of the design agency landscape will change when the roles of designers start to shift in potentially dramatic ways? Oh, it's Christian Eliason. Thank you for your question, and thanks for Kendall for the overlay.
I'm going to rephrase and thank you for asking how do I think, because this is just me, right? I'm gonna say I'm not predicting the future. Please don't take it as such. I think the agencies will become smaller and more focused. That is already happening. Look at us at Base. We're a tiny boutique agency. And when the clients come to us, they're stunned. Like, wait, guys, you did this giant project. You did this. And you're like 17 people in New York. Yep, that's all it takes. And it'll be even maybe it doesn't, 5 years from now, that could be even smaller. The single individuals who are generalists and who have enough energy and enough sort of understanding of how things work will gain even more power. It's been coming.
Yeah.
Internet has facilitated that already. I know so many people who act as an agency and they're actually single, very talented individuals. And they just bring teams together. So that will become even more prevalent. And yeah, that's what will happen. And so that means life of junior designers or junior creatives will become maybe more difficult, but really, truly also more exciting. So the people who question, the curious ones, will rise faster to the top because they will be the ones who will be driving this tsunami, not even a wave.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. And again, you're living it, you're experiencing it, and it's so great to sort of hear from your own experience, in this space, and you're wrestling with the problems in real time, and so it's really helpful, I think, hear directly from the practitioners out there in the world, moving the story forward. Mirek, one question I like to ask as we kind of wrap up here, in this kind of space of rapid change, what are the things that keep you interested, creatively, or what are the things that really drive you? And that doesn't have to be tools, doesn't have to be the digital space. What do you turn to kind of keep that creative well full and that drive and that curiosity, moving forward?
Culture, books. I read. I'm not going to say a lot, but I read, I listen when I drive to the books, nonfiction, philosophy, fiction, contemporary philosophy, which like that's like a lot about what's happening to the world, what's happening to AI, and art. Art examines art is in my mind when it's art like with a capital A, with like truly art, questions culture.
Yeah.
And if you go deep and if you try to sort of educate yourself and think about how it evolves, it opens up interesting ways to look at the world, and that's always exciting. And then lastly, looking at what is being done by young and unexpected talent. I'm always fascinated, and I'm like often blown away, just like, oh my God, just there's stuff that's coming out that's in our space. Like, I wish we did that. I wish we could even go anywhere near that. And then I look at like, wait a second, this person who did this is 22 years old. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but of course, it makes total sense, because that's when you have the bravery.
Yep. Experiences, culture moves the story forward, and sometimes we can be distracted by all the things being shown to us, via the algorithms every day. But I think you're right, like looking for those places of inspiration in philosophy, in culture. They're there, they're moving the story forward, whether we know it or not.
Whether we
So I think
admit it or not, that's what's, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a great place to end on. Mirek, thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to just sort of hear from you and your experiences, and take some of that inspiration, for myself as I go back and sort of work on some of these emerging technologies and tools that we can hopefully enable, the next great creative kind of out there in the world, just hacking around and trying to solve a problem for themselves and for others. So thank you so much for your time today.
Talon, thank you for the amazing conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, such a pleasure. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We will be back next month with another great conversation. Feel free to reach out to me or to the SoDA team on the various platforms. We're out there. We're always excited and interested to talk about kind of your experiences out there in the world. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next month.